Welcome to our In Focus discussion tonight, listening to the unsheltered. Solving the issues around homelessness can be difficult, no doubt. There are expenses, there are barriers. There are a number of stakeholders. We're talking business owners, to city and state officials, to residents of neighborhoods where the services are. Tonight, though, we're hearing from the most impacted group in this issue, the people who are unsheltered themselves. Joining us first tonight is Deborah Evans, who is currently living unsheltered in Salt Lake City. Deborah, thanks so much for giving of your time and coming in and sharing your perspective tonight. We really appreciate it. Let's start with your story. I would imagine it's not easy to talk about, but tell us a little bit about how you ended up in the situation you're in now.
Just went through a lot of life changes, I guess. I lost my mom, and that's kind of where it started. I messed up and got addicted to drugs, and then from there it didn't really get any better.
Mm-hmm.
But
did you ever think you'd find yourself in this situation?
definitely not.
Yeah.
Definitely not. No, I was like, I had everything I needed: my kids, my family, and
Goals and dreams.
Yeah, definitely.
I would imagine. And then, then those events you talk about started taking place. Talk about what you're doing to work to lift yourself up and to move forward.
Well, just recently, my friend Ksenia gave me, of the Nomad Alliance, she gave me a detox kit, and it's helped me get sober, and it's helped me just want to do more, and it just knowing that she's there, and it helps me knowing that she has faith in me.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's an interesting point. It helps you knowing that you have an advocate in your corner who believes in you.
Yeah.
Very important point there. What do you find most difficult about day-to-day aspects of being unsheltered?
A lot. Like, we don't have like fridges and stoves and stuff like that, so when we get food, it goes bad faster. And just people messing with us, kind of, you know, because we always have to move, and we lose a lot of our stuff all the time. So, I mean, that way you learn not to get too attached to things.
Mm-hmm.
So,
talk more about that. How often do you move from place to place?
a lot, a lot. It's probably 3 or 4 times every like few months.
Mm.
We don't get to stay in one place very long.
So when you move around like that and you go from one place to the next, you already brought up the fact that getting sober is something you're working on. How much more difficult does it make it for you when you're trying to achieve that goal?
A lot, a lot more difficult, because then you can't just, it's easier to focus on being sober and doing that when you have a stable place or somewhere that you can just relax and do that at.
Well, what would you say is the number one thing that would make your time living unsheltered easier?
Just if people weren't so judgmental. Like, I understand that we look different, we probably sound different, we probably have different views and stuff like that, but we're the same. Mm-hmm. We're just like everybody else, and it's a lot harder when people stay away from us because of us being homeless.
Yeah. Do you feel like you have the services that are necessary to help you get back on track? In addition to sobriety issues, like as far as employment and other issues?
Yeah, definitely. Especially now with, like I said, Ksenia and the groups that come out and help us with food. They help us with like fresh water. They help us with everything, honestly. Like, Ksenia's came and helped me do video court on her phone just so I wouldn't go to jail and stuff. So having those groups out there that help us, that's really helpful.
Yeah, that's incredible. And we'll be talking to her a little bit later in the show as well. Real quick before we let you go, though, what would you like our viewers to know about people who are unsheltered? You kind of talked a little bit about it already, but what else would you like our viewers to know?
Just understand we're going through a hard time, and instead of judging us and tearing us down, it'd be a lot better if you could just either help bring us up or not do anything at all, I guess.
Yeah, that's some good advice there. After this interview, where are you going to go?
I'm probably going to go out back to my tent with my husband.
All right. Well, we wish you the best. It's very great to hear you come in here and raise your voice and give us some perspective of what you're dealing with on the front lines. I really appreciate your bravery in coming in here and sharing that with us tonight. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for staying with us for our second In Focus discussion tonight on listening to the Unsheltered. Joining us now is Ksenia Knazova, the founder of Nomad Alliance, an advocacy and support group for the Unsheltered. Ksenia, great to have you on the show. Thanks so much for making time for us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me on, Glen and ABC4.
You bet. Talk about Nomad Alliance and what you do. How's it different from other groups?
Well, Dick, who's here joining me today, he actually said that the biggest thing isn't the services we provide, it's the fact that we really care. We're just a group of citizens who are acting however we can to do our small part to help this crisis, because it is a crisis. People are really suffering on the streets, and we do a variety of things. We do these regular supply drives every other Sunday, and we gift the population clothes and tents and sleeping bags, and recently haircuts, showers. We washed their hair for Mother's Day. We gave them carnations to celebrate all the moms on the street. We also help provide employment. We have an unsheltered girl working at Zest now and loving it. We've placed about 15 people. Some of them are detoxing right now. We also do detox kits to help them get off the hard drugs, like Deborah. Deborah's been killing it. She's decreased her use 90% and has been completely clean for about a week now. We're really, really proud of her.
I want to hit on something she said, and that was one of the things that really helps her is just knowing that you have faith in her. That really caught my attention. Talk about how that simple act can help someone.
Well, you know, this is a forgotten population. It's a population that the city just tries to shove under the rug with these abatements, forcing them to move from place to place to place so that the business community no longer has that blight right in front of their buildings. And I really think that a lot of them, their families have forgotten them. Their families have often kicked them out. And they have very, very few support systems, if they ever had that to begin with. So just the fact that someone goes there and cares for them. We recently were checking on a girl who's been detoxing. She's pregnant with twins. She's been completely clean and sober now for 3 weeks with the help of our kits. And her and her boyfriend laughed because they said, yeah, someone's checked on her every day. And she looked at me, she's like, I've never had anyone care for me like that.
Yeah, that's incredible.
It really is.
You mentioned that you're a group of citizens. Does that mean anyone can join you?
Anyone can join us. That's why we're called the Alliance. We're just a group of people working however we can. We always need a lot of help. We help them get IDs. So the DMV gave us the very first bulk appointment so that we can bring in a big group of 5 to 10 directly to the Wiegand to get their vouchers, and then directly to the DMV. How easy is that?
Talk more about why that is so important and how much of a barrier that can be not having the appropriate ID.
Well, an ID is everything. An ID tells the world who you are. It allows you to apply for food stamps and housing and even give plasma. So there's a lot of things that you can do with an ID, or even if you're accosted by a police officer, you can at least show them who you are. So an ID is huge, and it's really, really easily lost. There's a lot of theft on the streets. These abatements throw people's entire possessions out. They've lost their IDs during abatements. They've lost their medication during these abatements. So that's, it's such a simple thing to drive them from point A to point B, from point B to point C, and then back to point A.
Sure.
And we always need help. Today we took them to a laundromat to get some of their clothes washed. We take them to get showers. We do these workshops. Tomorrow we have a workshop teaching them self-defense and cognitive behavioral therapy, music therapy.
Things we all take for granted.
Things we all take for
in
granted.
everyday life. Wanted to ask you one thing. You work with the unsheltered population on the front line. What is something you know about them that maybe the average person doesn't?
Well, they're you and they're me.
That's a great message.
It could happen to any one of us. It's our friends, our neighbors, our mothers, our daughters, and every single American's probably a paycheck or two, or the vast majority, away from ending up in that same position. And wouldn't you want a helping hand? Because all of the cards are stacked against them. If you don't have an ID, you can't get a job. If you don't have transportation or a phone, how can you make an ID appointment?
Yeah.
How can you acquire a job? How can you do any of these things?
So
once you get down there, it's almost impossible to claw your way back up without that help and that support.
Very important point. I'm glad you made that point. Another question for you. Homeless shelters. We've just learned that they don't work for everyone in the population. Why is that?
That's a very good question, Glenn. And you know, I really appreciate you guys allowing a nomad to come on the air and share her point of view, because I feel like we as the sheltered population have the hubris of spending $63 million to erect 3 shelters that not one person has asked them, what do they want? What do they need? Will you use this? Is this a good use of our money? And we found that it's not. There's a reason why all these tent settlements are all over the city. It's because these shelters are often very dirty, they're often violent, there's a lot of theft, there's a lot of really rigorous rules where if you're even late by 5 minutes, all your things are thrown out. And there's, you know, a one strike you're out policies where we can't expect people to get completely clean overnight, which is why these kits are working so great, is because they're allowed to taper off. They know that we will still love them and support them and help them even if they relapse. And that's not how the vast majority of these shelters and institutions deal with this population. You cannot, a carrot is much better than a stick. You cannot shame or trounce people into being better. You just have to love them and support them and give them a helping hand.
All right, we could go on for a lot more time, but unfortunately our time has run out. Thanks so much for being here with us. We really appreciate your insight and what you add to the conversation tonight.
Thank you so much, Glenn. Really appreciate all of you.
Welcome to our third and final and focused discussion tonight on listening to the unsheltered. Joining us now via Zoom is Andrew Johnston, who is the Salt Lake City Director of Homeless Policy and Outreach. Andrew, appreciate your time tonight. Thanks for being with us.
My pleasure.
I know you're new to the job, so we'll get into this as much as we can with you, but there are a lot of stakeholders that we're talking about when it comes to dealing with the issues of homelessness. So what role do the unsheltered take in these decisions?
Well, they should play a big role, and I think over the last several years, initial development of the new shelter system and access to providers and services, they're on many boards and community groups, including the Salt Lake Valley Coalition to End Homelessness. There's always improvement that could be done there, and we need more voices at the table because there is a wide variety of voices in the unsheltered and homeless community, from those in the shelters to who are actively being housed right now or rehoused to on the streets in tents.
Let's dig into that a little bit more. How often will you plan on communicating with them to get their input as the city moves forward?
Sure. Well, as a city, we tend to fund other programs that do a lot of that work. So we fund the Wiegand Center that does a lot of work, and Pamela Atkinson down there. We fund Volunteers of America outreach teams which go out, including the adult team and the youth teams, the Youth Resource Center. We fund a lot of programs, and we talk to them a lot as well. I think for me personally, this is my second day on the job with the city, and my plan is to be out there as much as I possibly can, interacting and talking and listening.
Okay, good to know. I'm also glad you brought Pamela Atkinson up, because you can't have this conversation without mentioning her, so thank you for that. What do you see as the greatest needs when it comes to supporting the unsheltered community right now?
The biggest need is housing. We need housing for everyone, but we badly need deeply affordable housing. That's the housing that the market won't create on its own. It needs to have money put into it to subsidize it long term. That's a huge need right now across the board. I think the second piece is we also need mental health supports and things, not just for severe mental illness, but also for the trauma that Deborah brought up, that little t trauma, big T traumas, things that lead people to struggle in life. We need that support for them. And I'm glad she brought up the advocacy and having friends and mentors. Those are huge pieces of this.
Yeah. So we'll get more into the housing again in just a second. But there are a lot of small needs that can also help the homeless population. We mentioned a little bit about getting IDs and the importance of that, places to charge, say, a phone. How are you thinking about the city's role when it comes to these smaller issues that can really go a long way?
Well, for a long time, a lot of city services were providing that on an unofficial basis. I think the biggest thing we've noticed during COVID is the lack of library access. Libraries have been the place to go during the daytime for a lot of those needs: bathroom, hygiene, place to sit, be out of the weather, a place to charge your phone, to check computers and keep access to friends and family. That's been a huge need, and I think opening those libraries is a huge part of what we need to be doing going forward as much as we can. I think the other things are things we've done before. We fund outreach teams across the city through Volunteers of America. We've also done other things for helping with the ID with Wiegand Center and those other providers. I think there's so many small things that can happen, and we're happy to have other folks joining this cause and helping out as much as possible. We need as many hands as possible. Yeah,
talk more about that, because in the last segment we talked about citizens coming out and doing their part. They mentioned one of the things they're doing is, this block appointment where they're going to drive unsheltered members of the community to the DMV to get that stuff taken care of. How vital of a role do they play in this overall picture?
Well, I think volunteers can play a huge part of this. You can't possibly have a system that's all paid. It would be massive and very expensive, and it's hard to find money for these services. So yeah, I think volunteers are helpful. I think also we're careful to make sure that people aren't exploiting the homeless. We've had that in the past at times. But great citizens who come out and support and do the things you're doing can be very helpful to this.
Okay, the city recently announced the construction of that tiny village community. The mayor made the announcement. I believe you were there, if I remember right, as well.
Yep.
Talk about the multi-pronged approach that the city is taking, and if anything is missing from that you would like to see added.
Well, the tiny home village is one piece, but the key piece is community. I think that model is based on a concept of some folks will really gravitate towards that type of housing. Other people do well in permanent supportive housing. They need higher needs. Some folks do well in the shelters, some folks don't. Everyone's a little different. So I think from the city end of things, we have to think not just the city, but the entire state, the Wasatch Front particularly. One city can't house everybody. And so the Salt Lake Valley Coalition to End Homelessness is a huge piece of this, coordinating with the state and other municipalities on housing options and building those everywhere we can. Immediately, looking at a lot of motels and hotels. We've extended the winter motels into the spring and into the summer. We're working with other providers to keep those options available as long this year as we possibly can while we plan for next fall. But again, it comes down to different types of housing, and that's a zoning question. That's a funding question. It's so expensive to build. It's hard to even find stuff to acquire right now to remodel. So we have our battle cut out for us, but we can get this done, and it's going to take all that housing and more.
You mentioned a good point there, that this is just not a problem for the capital city. It's a problem for the entire state. However, when we've seen in the past, you take it to other cities and try to build, say, a shelter in those cities, they don't want it in their backyard. So what's your message to those around the state who think that this is just a capital city program and it should mostly fall on your shoulders?
Well, I think there's a lot of education that needs to be done about how it works right now and how it doesn't work. From the city's perspective, we are happy to take on our role. We do everything we possibly can. We can do more. We will do more. But we also have to think about this as a housing question. And so when we talk about shelters, we can get into those difficult conversations with people and municipalities and things. And people are scared. I get it. They don't have exposure to the population. That makes them nervous. But as our first two speakers talked about, these are our family and our friends, people we already know. When we talk about housing, I think it can be a different conversation because we need that everywhere for our own kids and grandkids, because our children and grandchildren are going to be the ones who may become homeless in a few years from now. We got to think about it that way and plan ahead for them.
Yeah, good advice there. Andrew Johnston is the Director of Homeless Policy and Outreach for Salt Lake City. Andrew, you have a big job ahead of you, and we wish you luck. Thanks for joining us.
Appreciate it. Thanks.